We just watched Penn State Notre Dame on Thursday night. And I was texting with Greg Papa yesterday. He's like, who do you like tonight? I'm like, 44-11.
Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter.
Yeah, and then watch 59, the right tackle for Notre Dame. And Papa's texting me last night, like, do you think Abdul Carter will be there at 11? And I'm like, I don't think so, man. This, but he's so explosive and very good. Now, Tyler Warren will be there probably at 11. College football, I know you just love football, but the NFL consumes you. For people who love college football and watch it, and I know you watch it too, you see it. There are a lot of guys who kind of look like Kyle Juszczyk wearing 44 around college football. It is a thing. It's a thing. Like, I notice it every week. Some of them are tight ends, some of them are fullbacks, but they're out there. Now, Tyler Warren is different. He's 6'6",
and he's 261.
He's 261, yeah.
And he's moving like he's 240, which is what I've seen him play 3 times now, and every single time I've tweeted, Penn State, number 44, you are a 49er. And I learned his name yesterday. This is how I watch and I look at numbers. Like, you just went 11, 44, 59, right? Now I'm starting to learn the names because now the 49er season is over. And I'm not just watching these games on silent copy. I went to the Penn State bar, by the way, in the marina last night, Monahan's.
Which is what? Oh,
yeah,
Monahan's Penn State bar?
It was crazy. I will find the video of one of the touchdowns and we'll play it here in a second. But I didn't put it up online yesterday because they ended up losing. But Penn State fans would have.
I guess bus stop was empty then. Georgia bar.
Yeah, that is the Georgia bar. That's right. Yeah, bus stop was empty, and I think that the Notre Dame bar is the Irish Times downtown, but we didn't want to go downtown. So I was showing my cousin around. He's coming in from Bakersfield, and he was amazed. He's like, "There's this many Penn State fans on the West Coast," and it's packed. It was cool. It looked like they were going to win that game, and then they threw that terrible pick. Yeah. But anyway, 44.
Yeah. So my question.
Go ahead.
No, he's been one of the stories of college football this year because Penn State hired a new offensive coordinator. They hired Kansas's offensive coordinator this last season. His name's Andy Koltnicki, and he's extremely creative. Anyone who's watched Penn State saw them run double passes. They put Tyler Warren as an eligible tackle and, lined him up at left tackle, but made him eligible. And they ran that play twice this year at least. And I think they ran it for a touchdown against SC. If you want to go find that play, he makes a really difficult contested catch. So not only is he a good player, but he played for a really creative offensive coordinator who moved him around, who ran all kinds of trick plays. Penn State was just really, really fun to watch. And so the question is, like, if you're the Niners drafting at 11 and you've got all these needs, but you also have a board that rates the players and the best player available is a tight end from Penn State named Tyler Warren, what do you do? Could you use him? Is it malpractice to draft a tight end when you need an offensive tackle, when you need defensive edge, when you need interior defensive lineman, when you need another linebacker? Is it malpractice to take a tight end?
First thing I would
played
say
Brandon Ayuk.
Is
you're probably gonna give George Kittle more money.
I first noticed 44 Tyler Warren lined up out wide.
Yeah,
I didn't notice him as a tight end at first because they line him up out wide so often. Then he's at this H-back spot, and then he's in the slot. Then he's an inline tight end. And that was what really stood out to me, is that he's 260 and he's out wide. I get it that's tougher to do in the NFL, but that also is the 49ers forte. And now the whole league is doing stuff like that. But it started with not just Juszczyk. Obviously, we look at 44 and 44 Tyler Warren, but guys like Kittle, guys like Deebo Samuel, McCaffrey, obviously, they're amorphous offensively. They're putting guys everywhere out on the field. I think that's a hallmark of the system. Second thing is that tight end 2 is also a glaring need for the 49ers. I think that the lack of one that has been to be a legitimate counter threat to Kittle has held back this offense. So you could argue that it obviously isn't as big of a need as some of those other spots, but it definitely is a need. Then we can get into the whole debate about, okay, do they go best player available regardless of where they are in the draft? Or yesterday, Tim Kawakami and I on the San Francisco Standard's live room, we debated a bit about this. he thinks best player available, he agrees with me, is the way to go throughout most of the draft, but he thinks that there should be an exception made early in this draft because he sees the need at offensive tackle for future building purposes as well to be so great. So is 11 a high enough pick to budge out of the best player available strategy? Do you feel confident enough at 11 when you're on the clock that that is a valuable enough pick that you have a surefire prospect? I just come from the school of thought, guy, that there are no surefire prospects. So you have to go with your gut and the best guy that you think is up on the board when you are on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one answer. It's so relative. Like best player available. Well, how much better is he than your need? Is he slightly better than your need or a lot better than your need? But I think, you think back, was it Kyle? Who did Kyle talk to? Maybe it was a conversation with Papa, because he only does the Kawakami interview, he does that interview in the preseason or before, in the off season. But he made a comment, or maybe it was a press conference, you may remember. He made a comment within the last 2 months that basically was, we were right not to take an offensive lineman in the second round. That, remember last year's draft, there were all these tackles that were kind of in the conversation around the Niners, and they didn't take any of them.
Roger Rosengarten
being one.
Well, they were right to take an offensive lineman in the third round.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that Kyle basically said, like, we didn't like any of them, so we weren't going to take any of them. And and when you watch the guys that we passed on, we were right. Kyle said that in the last 2 months. I don't remember where. And essentially,
RJ Gillen and Tariq Ahmad, the two personnel guys, said the same thing after the draft. Well, they didn't say we were right, but they explained the strategy. They said it's really hard for there to be an offensive tackle that matches what we need to justify using a high pick on him. And nobody matched that for the 49ers last year, given where their first pick was.
The other thing about Tyler Warren, and you can weigh in on, obviously you can weigh in on this, but tight end does block, right?
Yes.
So are you helping your blocking, A, because he is a weapon, B, he frees up your other blocking tight end, George Kittle, C, he blocks himself. I go back to the question again. Is it, especially when you have an offensive head coach, you always are aware, like, are we just drafting toys, or are we actually making this team better in a significant way? That's the question I think you answer with a tight end who's a dynamic pass catcher versus a tackle. With all due respect to tackles, they're not toys, right? Like,
yeah, they're not offensive weapons.
Interior defensive linemen, they're not toys. Defensive ends are toys, but like the guys you get, like Abdul Carter's not the ones you get at 11 generally, right? The ones you get at 4, those guys are toys. You move them all over the defense, and so that's where I keep going back to, is like, if you're Kyle Shanahan, I think you have to be. You're asking your front office and your evaluation people, I just want to make sure we're not just drafting some guy because me, the play caller, would have fun with him, right? Because when you watch Penn State, they had a lot of fun with him. He's got to be the best player that can. He's got to make Brock's life easier. He's got to make Ayuk's life easier. He's got to make Kittle's life easier. And he has to be able to pick up the slack when one of these guys gets hurt or two of them get hurt.
Well, exactly. And they needed more toys this year because with Ayuk out, with Christian McCaffrey out, this team finished dead last in average separation at the time of the catch or at the time of the incompletion. And that hurts your pass protection. So having weapons does inherently, or at least theoretically, help the pass protection because guys get open quicker and then the quarterback can get rid of the ball quicker. So the blocking looks better. So improving the offensive line itself is not the only way to improve pass protection. But I wrote about this many times this year. I mean, this has been going back for years. I thought that the 49ers have needed to do a little bit better up front. They did. This was a weird year in that they did improve significantly in one part of the offensive line, but then they regressed significantly in another part. The right side was terrible, which made Brock Purdy's awesome year in 2023. I thought all the more impressive because the right side was atrocious in pass protection. They improved that with Pooney. McKivitz actually got better, still slightly below average in pass protection, but people who think McKivitz is the worst tackle in the league just haven't been watching the rest of the league. There's some really, really bad tackle play, and I think that the addition of Pooney really helped Colton on the right side. But where the 49ers truly regressed this year was at center, and Jake Brendel was dealing with knee tendonitis already in the offseason. I think that really contributed to his slide, and left guard. And Aaron Banks is going to be a free agent this offseason. And especially against Miami, where Jake Brendel struggled, that was the game where the A-gap pressure forced that interception that essentially ended the game from Brock Purdy. It was Calais Campbell. It was a stunt that Jake Brendel just didn't pick up. It was really, really starkly highlighted to me that the 49ers will need to improve that interior, which generally means veteran signing, because centers and rookie and center doesn't go together in Kyle Shanahan's system. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
So you look at that, you look at maybe Drew Dahlman is going to be a free agent. There are a couple other names we can all get into that.
Stanford, Michigan was Drew
Stanford, and then that was Drake Nugent. He's on the roster, practice squad. Drew Dahlman was Stanford throughout his entire college career. That's Chris Dahlman's son. Chris Dahlman was a center for Steve Young and the 49ers. And back when Drew Dahlman came out of Stanford, before he was drafted by the Falcons, I was able to interview both him and his dad. And it was really neat because they're both cut from the same cloth. And that's the cloth that fits what Shanahan has wanted, really cerebral center, but also center who can move and get those reach blocks executed on the second level. Because Chris Dahlman was back in the Bob McKittrick era, and Bob McKittrick, he was the offensive line coach who really emphasized mobility up front, zone blocking up front. Less zone blocking, more mobility, but that really was melded with what Alex Gibbs did. And Alex Gibbs was the O-line coach that formed the Mike Shanahan lines. So it all comes full circle now, and that the 49ers obviously run a Shanahan system, but a lot of that was influenced by what McKittrick emphasized with the dynastic 49ers with those athletic linemen. So I think they need somebody like that at center, and it needs to be a veteran, and I think that can make the whole line better. And then the toys that you add elsewhere, maybe a Tyler Warren, that can further improve the pass protection for Purdy.
All right, that's it. January 10th, that's my pick, Tyler Warren.
Did I convince you?
Well, no, I watched him all year, and I just felt guilty liking him in this. Like, oh, this is going to be such a, it's like saying you should draft Ashton Genty at 11. Well, you shouldn't, So I need somebody to come in and, it's good to hear somebody else say that it's a responsible pick, because it just, watching him all year, it felt so irresponsible. Somebody made a comment on the stream that the other thing to say about Tyler Warren is, if you can find an elite player who blocks and catches passes but doesn't play tackle or receiver, he's cheaper than both of those guys, right? Like, somebody made a comment about if you have a 2 or 3. Actually, it's a super chat here, so I don't know if it's a little early for that, but since I started referencing it, we could put it up from Brad.
My comments aren't even open yet. Let me.
Okay.
I'll put it up on the screen.
But there's something to be said for. Brad says, what is a player who gets 2 or 3 contracts and becomes Kittle 2.0, face of the franchise-esque kind of guy worth? It's got to be worth it, just taking a big offensive line body guy available at 11, which made me think, yeah, there is, if you nail if you get a top 3 tight end, it's a cost-effective move also, right?
Yes.
Now, you also want the top tackle and you want the best receiver and all that, but second-tier receivers get paid like top-tier receivers.
Exactly. Kittle has been a top-tier receiver, like not just tight end, top-tier receiver in terms of the receiving efficiency. They've gotten him for $15 million a year. Just rough math. The top guys are over $30 million a year now, but Kittle is producing in the receiving game at that level. Like, he's over 1,000 yards, despite the fact that he's in the block a lot. So you're spot on. That's a great point, because the cost efficiency down the road for the tight end position is a definite money ball hack in the modern NFL.
I think the guys that we like that people will love, because when you're drafting at 11, you kind of get to you like, oh yeah, Abdul Carter. If we can move up. I doubt he'll be there. Mason Graham, everyone's going to like the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. He's not going to be there. The best 2 tackles, probably, if there are two great tackles, I mean, there's probably one, are not going to be there. The best two receivers are not going to be there, And the unfortunate thing in this draft, it's probably two quarterbacks go ahead of 11. It's not one of those 4 QBs in the top 10 drafts unless something changes. So, Travis Hunter is not going to be, like all the 11 gets you close enough to kind of fall in love, but you don't actually get those guys.
Yeah.
And that's where positionally tight end, you can actually get an elite guy. Maybe. Now, if you told me he goes 9, that wouldn't shock me either.